So welcome once more. I feel like I'm in a fireside chat here in this chair. I wish you all could be sitting in a chair like this. Maybe the generous thing would be to offer it to one of you. Phil? So, we're at this midway point. If you're a person who likes to sort of check the calendar and notice where we are exactly, we just passed the midway point between the winter solstice and the spring equinox, right? February 2nd, known in this country as Groundhog Day and as Candlemas in some other communities. And probably you're beginning to see the perceptible change in the daylight moving through the days. The sun's rising higher in the sky. It's not so low on the horizon anymore. And so we're beginning to see all these signs of spring. I've seen bluebirds hovering about the boxes and flocks of robins about, and spring flowers, the winter flowers starting to come into bloom. If you've got any hellebores, the Lenten rose is blooming now, snowdrops. And all of these changes in the natural world point to the three basic facts of all existence and shared by all beings, from the tiniest microbe to the biggest brain of the greatest genius in the world. And so what are these three characteristics? Well, if you've been coming here for a while, you could probably name them very easily. But if you've not, just as a reminder, the first one is impermanence. So that impermanent nature of reality or inconstancy, and known in Pali as anicca. And the second characteristic is universal suffering, or the deep unsatisfactory nature of life. It's the sense somehow that things never quite measure up to what we thought they were going to be or how they were going to be. And dukkha is the Pali word for the English unsatisfactoriness, which is such a long word. The third characteristic is called no self, or not self, anatta. And when we first hear about these three characteristics of all life, we may feel a little dismayed because they sound a bit dismal. And the first one, impermanence, points to this perhaps a state of like bobbing in the ocean, not having an anchor or not having stability. The second one, the suffering, is just can be downright discouraging. That's the nature of life. We humans worry about the future, we regret the past, and we blame ourselves for everything in the present, whether or not we're guilty. Particularly in this culture. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. The third characteristic, that of no self, just might seem downright perplexing, confusing. What the heck does that mean? No self, not self. So here's the good news. We can balance these three characteristics of life with a practice, or cultivating some practices that actually look at what appear to be the opposites of those characteristics. So, for example, in order to see impermanence, we can cultivate what might seem to be its opposite, which is stability. Likewise, for the insight of suffering or unsatisfactoriness, we can cultivate well-being, develop practices of well-being. And to understand the third characteristic, that of no self, we cultivate inner qualities like courage. Pat spoke about that last week in talking about Martin Luther King. Or confidence. So these are inner qualities that ironically sort of point to a strong sense of self. So let's look at the first pair, impermanence and stability. You've probably all noticed by now that when you're sitting in practice, the mind starts to wander at times. It skitters off to the present, to the future or to the past, or it's just lost in commentary about what's going on right now. And it's lost in a swirl of concepts and ideas that aren't related to what's happening in this present moment. But have you ever noticed how those concepts and those ideas, when you're lost in the story, seem really solid? They seem very permanent. And they've got a very strong sense of, this is how it is. It's no other way. This is it. And so what we want to do as we continue to practice is to cultivate some steadiness, some calming of the mind, so that as things settle and become a little more clear, we start to see, oh yeah, everything is in flux. We see that impermanence is the truth. It is a fact of life. And the paradox here is that the quieter the mind gets, the more it can see the flow of change and the rapidity of change, the impermanence of everything. So the rhythm of a mindfulness practice throughout your day, meditation practices throughout the week, they can create that steadiness of mind that allow you to see impermanence without being caught in the swirl. It's also true that whatever's flowing through your mind is sculpting your brain, which may be a rather scary thought. And a habit pattern of meditation practice over time means that your brain is changing. You're using your mind to change the brain for the better. And the good news is it benefits your whole being, not just your mind, but your body, your heart. Not only that, but that is going to touch every person that you come in contact with, because it will be how you are. There's one more thing that gets created with this practice, and that's resilience. And couldn't we all use a little more of that? So resilience, which can serve us when we have huge or dramatic changes in our lives, great impermanence. And we are of a nature to age and decay. Our bodies are changing. We are of a nature to be ill or injured. Our health will change, or there'll perhaps be an accident. And we are of a nature to die. So we will lose dear beloved ones. And what we're practicing, building this resilience, will allow us to meet those changes with more ease. The second quality that we can cultivate is well-being, and that's the partner to suffering. So the notion of this unsatisfactory quality of life, we, on the other hand, can develop some practices that allow us to see the suffering, be with the suffering, in a little bit different way. One of the things that practices of well-being do is to help us remember our true nature. So sometimes we forget, what is our true nature anyway? We're worried, we're anxious, we're angry. Not our true nature. And these practices of well-being allow us to get back in touch with our true nature. If you would, in this moment, just settle back into your chair and close your eyes if that's okay with you. And just pause, relax the body. Open to what's here. And listen to these few words of Mary Oliver. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Pausing, relaxing, opening. Let this word well-being reside in the mind right now. Rest in well-being. Just aware of what's felt in the body. Well-being of the face. Well-being of the hands. The belly. Well-being of the heart. We're just resting for a moment in your true nature, that which is wholesome, wise, perhaps content. One of the fundamental practices for well-being is the practice of contentment. This idea that I can be with whatever has arisen, whatever's arising in this moment, that I can say yes to it, that I can put out the welcome mat for it. And one thing this practice of contentment does is it helps to diminish the craving that creates our suffering. And craving, as we know, is habituated by our culture. How many of you watched the Super Bowl? A few hands. All those ads conditioning us to believe that we need to replace or at least upgrade everything, your possessions, your body, continuously. We've got to keep fixing it, making it better, the next best thing. So craving's also fed by the stories that we hear. We want what others have, a new job, a different partner, a sexier body, easier children, a nicer place to live, more friends. The list is endless. And this driven quality, this craving for wishing things were other than they are, really alienates us from ourselves, separates us from ourselves, because we keep running and searching around for contentment. Where is it? Where can I find it? To be content with what we have is a form of wealth. Call it the wealth of happiness. Bhutan, with their wonderful ideas of gross national happiness. Wise contentment with what we have. Wise contentment. So it must be wise. With what we have, our goods, our physical being, our work, our community, it brings a sense of well-being if we can rest in allowing that to be the way it is. So how do we cultivate contentment for the sake of our well-being? Rather than just expecting it to land on our doorstep, which is wonderful when it does, but perhaps infrequent, we need to act in certain ways to invite contentment in, to invite joy into this moment. And sometimes these actions seem really small, the things we can do to cultivate this, almost like a single raindrop. It doesn't really have much weight or much effect, but if you have enough time and enough raindrops, you can create the Grand Canyon, right? So another moment. Close your eyes for another moment. And this time, let the focus be on the breath. So just breathing in deeply, exhaling, and once more inhaling deeply, and letting go on the out-breath. And now, if you would, bring to mind someone whom you've met that seems to be at ease with life, who radiates contentment, who smiles and seems truly happy with just this moment. And reflect for a moment what it's like to be in the presence of this person. How does this person's contentment affect your own? Allow yourself to feel any sensations in the body as you reflect on being in the presence of this person. So one of the things we can do to awaken contentment and joy is by purposefully prolonging any experience we have of contentment or joy. You know how the research talks about now that we know that our experiences are a bit like Velcro and Teflon. If we have a negative experience, it tends to be like Velcro. It sticks to us. We remember it a long time. It's hard to let go, get rid of, or forget, right? I see heads nodding around the room. When we have a pleasant experience, it's really nice, but it sort of just slides right on past us. So part of the cultivating of this practice of contentment is to really practice residing in those moments of joy or happiness. To really notice them and let yourself feel them. Let yourself feel them internally, not just think about them. Oh, that was a really beautiful sunset that I just witnessed. But really see if you can touch into what's the felt experience of this feeling of contentment. We remember also some words of the Buddha, which are a good reminder, and that we tend to forget this sometimes. You could search throughout the entire universe for someone who is more deserving of your love and affection than you are yourself, and that person is not to be found anywhere. You, yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and your affection. So we practice loving kindness for ourselves. We practice compassion for ourselves and generosity to enhance our well-being and that of other beings as well. So we might call a friend who's struggling, open the door for someone, pick up a piece of trash that's not in your yard, and just let the feelings of those acts, those expressions, let them be present for a while. Let them dwell with you. One writer has this to say about compassion for others. He writes, "Have compassion for everyone you meet, even if they don't want it. Even if they don't want it, have compassion for them. What appears bad manners and ill temper or cynicism is always a sign of things no ears have heard, no eyes have seen. You do not know what's going on down there where the spirit meets the bone. Have compassion for everyone you meet, no matter whether they want it or not. What appears bad manners and ill temper or cynicism is always a sign of things that no ears have heard, no eyes have seen. You do not know what wars are going on down there where the spirit meets the bone. So, reflect on your acts of goodness, your acts of generosity. Even if this is a little bit of a foreign idea, because for a lot of us we've been conditioned to think that I can't reflect on my goodness, my acts of generosity. We've been trained to think of those somehow as selfish or conceitful. But the truth is that any time you anticipate, participate in, or remember an act of generosity, it feeds your well-being. It will feed your well-being. It's a place to rest in calm. You can think about it for yourself when you have anticipated doing something generous or done it or remembered it. There's a sense of ease about that, a sense of calm, a sense of well-being, and a recognition of this feels like home. This is my true nature. And we're also deepening neural grooves in the brain. So, again, those acts are physiologically changing us. Stress and anxiety are reduced with such actions. The body softens. And most importantly, we increase the probability that we'll do that again. Those acts of generosity. The other thing that happens is that we begin to build some habit strength of confidence, sense of self-confidence and power, the ability to have an impact in the world, some strength and courage. And that motivates us to keep with the practice, which means now that we've rolled over into that third characteristic, not self, because what we're doing is we're cultivating the strong qualities of self, the confidence, the courage, the commitment, as a way to help us gain insight into this characteristic of no self. Gil Fronsdale, who's a teacher out on the West Coast, has this to say about not self. He says, as the mind gets quieter, as a sense of stability and well-being arise, it's possible to notice what the mind is doing. A lot of what we do around self, we take things as mine, myself, or who I am. We are defining ourselves by certain things, and these are all activities of the mind. So the practice of meditation is an opportunity to lay down all the vestiges of the activity of making me, myself, and mine, identifying with or assuming I am. Now, sometimes it's useful to remember these concepts about who I am. If I'm standing in the middle of the street and there's a car coming, I need to get out of the way. So I need to pay attention. But maybe we don't need as many concepts and constructs about this self as we think we do. So you might ask yourself these questions. Am I suffering stress because I'm holding on to a particular phenomenon or construct? And is that really me, myself, mine? And if it's stressful, but it's not me, why hold on to it? So in this sense, the insight of is not a doctrine of no self. It's a not self strategy for shedding suffering. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I'll close with these words from Ayakima. She writes, If one remembers what one is doing, keeps at it day after day without forgetting, and continues to meditate, not expecting great results, little by little it does happen. As one keeps working at it, there is a constant chipping away at the unreal thinking, because there's no happiness in that. And few want to hang on to unhappiness. Eventually, one runs out of things to do outside of oneself. The books are all saying the same things. The letters have all been written. The flowers have all been watered. And there's nothing left except to look inside. And as this happens again and again, a change takes place. There's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And she continues, the earth is moving in a circle. Life is moving from birth to death without us having to move at all. It's all happening without our help. The only thing we need to do is get to reality. Then, when we do, we will find that loving ourselves and loving others is the natural outcome of that. Because we are concerned with reality, and that is the heart's real work, is to love. But only if we've seen the other side of the coin in ourselves and have done that work. Then it's no longer an effort. It becomes a natural function of our inner feelings, inward directed, but shining outward. It's no longer an effort, but it becomes a natural function of our inner feelings, inward directed, but shining outward. So thank you for listening.